Welcome back, boxing fans. This weekend we got some big fights coming up. Obviously, my prediction league is happening. I've made my predictions, and we'll see what's going on. So let's get to some of these fights, check it out, and give our predictions on what's going to be happening this weekend. Choo choo choo. So this is not in any particular order. It's just the order that popped up on my prediction league. So this is Ulysses Iglesias, Cuban fighter, 168-pound fighter. Really starting to get a lot of push recently. On my weekend chat, somebody was, I can't remember who, but one of my subs was chatting him up, talking big about him as well. He's a very good Cuban, obviously comes from the Cuban school of boxing. Some power. I compared him in a previous video to David Morrell, a fighter that was more of the entertaining side of the Cuban boxing school, not that boring defense first, but a guy that has boxing skills, but also has an aggressive streak and some serious power. Currently 10-0 with 9 knockouts. He's going to be fighting Yevgeny Shevchenko, 16-1-1, 7 KOs. This is a great fight for both of them. These guys are both on that top 25, 168-pound level. And I've talked several times about the 168-pound division being very comparable to the 140-pound division. Very deep with that second tier of fighters who ultimately just need to fight one another. They can't all be waiting for the big money fights. They got to fight one another, stay busy, make their cash now, build their legacies, and eventually the guys that are the cream of the crop will move up and join the top guys at that division, whether that's a Benavidez, a Morrell, a Plant, a Canelo Alvarez. But this is a great step-up fight. It's a really good, intriguing matchup, and I think it's really going to be a good fight. My prediction for this fight was Iglesias by unanimous decision because Shevchenko has never been beat, like stopped. He's a tough guy, tough chin. I'm not saying that Iglesias couldn't stop him, but when we go and look at their resumes a little further, let's just check the box rec just to get a little more context to this story. So there we are. Iglesias. Julio Iglesias is his father. So already 26 years old, 6'2.5", currently fights out of Berlin. A lot of these Cubans have emigrated to Germany. He's not the only one. William Skull as well, another 168-pound fighter who currently is the mandatory from the IBF for Canelo Alvarez. Yet not fighting this level of opponent. So that's kind of something that I'm disappointed with as far as them pushing him into this position. When you look at Iglesias, his last opponent was Marcelo Corceres. Great opponent. For a guy, for his 10th fight, not even in double digits to fight a dude like Marcelo Caceres, great. Stopped him in 1 round. Sensational victory. Prior to that, he fought old-ass Isaac Chilemba, which is a good fight. Isaac Chilemba is a warhorse, only been stopped once in his career. Went the distance with this guy. I thought I saw him against somebody else that was recognizable, but maybe I'm just imagining things. For Shevchenko, obviously he has more experience. 18 professional fights, 16-1-1. He is 33 years old. So, it's quite a difference of where they are at this point of their career. Obviously from Russia, lives in California. His last loss, or his only loss, was literally a few years ago when he faced William Skull. Ended up losing the Skull by unanimous decision. So, that tells you a lot. Prior to that, he fought Nui Lawal, who at one time was really highly regarded, beat him, faced Naji Mohammadi, also a guy at one time that was very highly rated, beat him. Just recently, he faced undefeated Russian fighter Pavel Siligin, who was 13-0. Really high-level matchup. That fight ended up being a split decision draw. So he's a really good fighter. I'm trying to think, did he fight anyone else of mention? Not that I see. But right there, you can see he's really been in with a much higher level of opponent. So for Iglesias, this is definitely a statement fight. If he can go in and beat this guy more convincingly than his Cuban counterpart has, and more impressively than Russian, standout amateur, then, that would be a huge statement. And it would definitely really catapult him up those 168-pound ranks. Obviously, what's really going to determine most things is depending on who's promoting him and you know who he's in connection with, because we know that in truth, to make fights happen, you need to have promotional contact. You need to be in a similar promotional situation with other fighters, which is going to obviously grease the wheels for making big fights. So we will see what happens, but this is a really entertaining fight, a fight that many people are dismissing and overlooking, but a fight that has really repercussions for 168 pounds and obviously a potential young superstar fighter joining Morrell, who I think, was the best fighter at 168. Then we move to a great heavyweight matchup. Michael Hunter, 22-1-2, his only loss coming to Usyk in the cruiserweight division, fighting Cassius Chaney, 23-1. Cassius Chaney, 16 knockouts and 23 victories. Michael Hunter, 16 knockouts and 22 victories. Obviously, one draw on his resume against Povetkin, which most people feel was just a real fucking bad robbery. Michael Hunter was a good fighter. At one point, a couple years ago, he was really at that level where a world title fight had to happen. It was just inevitable. But then I think he signed with a different promotional company, and all of a sudden, all the leverage he put in, getting fights like against Povetkin, win, lose, or draw, that's a big name, and obviously a fight that's going to get you a lot of attention. He obviously beat the Congolese fighter, who's now going to be facing Big Baby Miller, right? Giving him his first loss as well. What's his name? Starts with a B. Yeah, but you can leave it in the comment section below. But obviously that was a huge victory for him as well, especially now in when you see basically where that guy has basically come, or where he is right now. He's obviously ranked very high. He's ranked higher than Michael Hunter, surprisingly, mostly because Hunter's been a little inactive. Currently 35 years old, right? Now is the time. After he faced Povetkin back in 2019, had that terrible draw, he ended up going on and facing pure bum-ass opponents. He faced Sean Lafferty, 10-3, and then he faced the guy Mike Wilson, who I'd never heard of, 21-1. Then he faced Jerry Forrester, a very good fighter, a fighter kind of like Cassius Chaney, one of that second-tier American fighters who are pretty good, right? But the point is, can they get to that elite level? And obviously time and level of opposition is very important. He had a draw against Forrest and then went on and faced two straight up bums before now getting a good fight with Cassius Chaney. And this is after facing guys like Sergey Zumin, who was undefeated, Felix Povetkin, one of the top heavyweights in the world, obviously beating undefeated Martin Bakole, right? A guy who obviously fought Alexander Usyk and gave him tons of trouble in the cruiserweight division. So he did his work. Now it was just a matter of him actually getting the big opportunities. Cassius Chaney, for his part, good, solid American, 36 years old, a little old, right? And when you think about how old he is and what he's done at this point of his career, you can say that he's kind of been under the radar. His last win was against Trevor Bryan, an overrated American fighter who at the time had already come off of a loss. He stopped him at 6, lost to George Arias, who was undefeated at the time when he faced him, 16-0. And outside of that, he hasn't really faced any real legitimate opposition. Nobody that you would be familiar with, nobody that would really interest you at all. So this is going to be a tough fight. He's definitely the bigger guy, 6'6", longer, physically bigger. Michael Hunter is a guy who's a cruiserweight, really, always fighting sort of above his natural weight in the heavyweight division, but obviously a lot more mobile than the majority of people he faced. And that's going to be his strength in this fight. His slickness, his awkwardness, and his ability to outbox bigger fighters. For Cassius Chaney, he's going to have to use a consistent jab to control Michael Hunter and try to set up his big power shots and try to use his physicality to maybe tire the older version of Michael Hunter out. But it's a really good fight. It's a fight where at this point you would expect Michael Hunter to win, but we've seen some unfortunate decisions go against him already. So, you never know what to expect in this boxing game, but it's definitely a solid fight and one to pay attention to. Then we get to probably the biggest circus show of the weekend, actually not getting nearly as much attention as I think I'm kind of surprised it's not getting far more attention across YouTube. Adrian Broner, who's always been a pay-per-view fighter, a guy that was able to talk his way into anything, a guy that, even when people didn't really respect him and have great expectations for him, people still supported him and still kind of favored him and hoped that he would do well. I was always looking for him to get that Keith Thurman fight, but unfortunately, quite a few fights recently have fallen through, whether he was just unable to be professional enough to make weight or get to the ring. Now he's going to be facing Blair Cobbs, who already has been exposed. Blair Cobbs, we know what he was. He's kind of like a Rolly Romero, a guy that talked a load of shit but never actually proved anything in the ring. The first time he stepped up to face a legitimate opponent, he got his ass knocked out. And since then, he hasn't really bounced back with any credible wins or anything worth note. Obviously, jumping in to face Adrian Broner, it's more of a cash grab than anything else. They figure these two fighters with their personalities, Broner, at this point of his career, is probably a solid opponent for Blair Cobb, because obviously he's older, been out of the ring, and definitely not at his best. But in saying that, I still favor Adrian Broner to beat him. Broner's the harder puncher. He's got the way better chin. He's just the better fighter overall. He's accomplished more. He's been in with the higher level of opponents. He's just the guy that has more ways to win this fight. Blair Cobb is who he is, an overrated fighter that talked a load of shit, tried to fucking cap off of Keith Thurman and many others, and basically when push came to shove, he failed and was exposed. And really now it's good, fine. Broner needs a payday. Blair Cobb, I'm not against people getting a payday, so he gets a payday as well. Obviously, the winner of this fight, maybe we could look forward to them facing Keith Thurman in 2025 or maybe late 2024. I hope that's Broner. I would like nothing more than to see Broner knock Blair Cobb out and then get a Keith Thurman fight, right? To put some big money under his belt, especially at this point of his career. I'd be cool with that. I have no problem with it. I think for Thurman and Broner at this point of their career, it's a fight worth making. So let's hope Broner is focused enough to do what he has to do to beat the hype job in Blair Cobb. But let me know if you feel differently. Do you think Blair Cobb can beat Adrian Broner? I guess anything is possible, but I don't think so. Then we get to this fight. Obviously, this is a fight people are probably not going to be that familiar with. Alexei Urgarov, hard-punching Russian, 12-1, 8 KOs. Obviously, he was a cruiserweight fighter, fighting top-level opposition, fighting for world titles, a guy that was sort of, fast-tracked in his career and failed for his world title in a great fight. If you didn't see that fight, you should definitely go check it out. It was a fucking great scrap between him and that other Russian fighter. Yeah. Oh, no, sorry. Against the French guy, Arsem Goulamirian, 26-0, the guy who obviously just lost recently to Zurdo Ramirez. It was a very good fight. Prior to that, he faced good fighters, Thomas Uzahausen, Latif Coyote, obviously, Goulamirian, who was a world champion, ended up losing. But that was very early in his career, less than double digits to end up facing a world champion. Or, now he's going to be facing Brandon Glanton. Glanton, 19 wins, 2 losses, never been knocked out, 16 KOs. Both of these guys, hard punchers, aggressive fighters, granite chins. So it should be a fucking great fight for as long as it lasts. On my prediction, I predicted to go the distance. Glanton is 32 years old, also a similar type of fighter to Urgarov. Short, squat, a little too small to really be a heavyweight, but obviously the perfect dimensions for cruiserweight. When you look at his resume, he hasn't faced really high-level opponents. He's lost to David Light, who was undefeated at the time, lost to a guy who was 3-0, in Sosalan Abarov. So it kind of exposes him as a very one-dimensional fighter, probably a guy who relies a little too much on his power, but doesn't really have the boxing skills to really beat higher level of opponents. So you'd have to favor the Russian fighter, who obviously has a long amateur pedigree, a lot more boxing skills, is a little taller, and a little more experienced to win this fight. So I am favoring Urgarov to win this fight, and then we'll see what happens with him moving forward. Obviously, if you follow the cruiserweight division, right now it's pretty good. It's at a good point. Now that you got Zerto Ramirez in there, you obviously got the two UK guys that are going to be matching up soon. Of course, you have Opataya, who is a fucking great fighter. Marius Briedis, who lost to Opataya, but showed that he's still super dangerous and potentially could beat any of these guys. And then you have guys like this, that next level of opponent who may get a world title opportunity, may get a big fight. And, it's good to pay attention and be familiar with who these guys are. And I definitely think stylistically, this should be a pretty entertaining fight. Then, of course, we get to my Canadian brethren, Stephen Butler, 34-4-1. Stephen Butler, tall, athletic, fast, good power. But the problem with him, as you can tell by these stats, he doesn't have a great chin. Good looking boy. I'm sure he pulls all the ladies. 6'3", got some money, light skinned brother. He's killing it, I'm sure, in Montreal, killing it. And maybe that's also the problem, right? Life is too good. Life is too easy. You're modeling on the side. You're boxing as well. 34-4-1, 28 KOs, knocked out all 4 times you lost. He's going to be facing Patrick Volney, 18-1, 12 knockouts. Patrick Volney has never been knocked out. And this is a tough matchup, right? A real tough matchup. Oh, no. What happened? Jump back. I want to kiss myself. So where's Butler? Butler obviously is coming off of a very good performance in his last fight, beating other fellow Canadian Stephen Rolls, stopping him in 1 round, which really was a shock to me. We see Stephen Rolls in with good fighters. Fought Golovkin, gave him a few rounds, been in with some other top-level dudes as well, and didn't get rolled over, right? Showed a lot of ability. But to get creamed like that by Butler, that was a surprise. We've also seen Butler face Janibek, obviously lost to him, getting knocked out in 2 rounds. If you move down his career, he lost to Jesus Marcius, stopped in 5, lost to Rio Murata. That was another world title fight, ended up getting stopped in 5 rounds. Beat Vitaly Kopalenko, nice guy, very approachable on social media. I've talked to him a little bit back and forth. Leonardo Tyner, right? So he's been in with quality fighters. Lost to fellow Canadian Brandon Cook back in the day, 2017. So he's always been one step below that world-class level. For Patrice Volney, another Canadian fighter, obviously he's 34 years old, very experienced, but not nearly as experienced. His only loss coming to Esquelfo Falco, right? Technical decision. Outside of that, he had a good fight with Uriel Gonzalez. We look at level of competition otherwise than that. He did face DeAndre Ware. And then, at that point, there's obviously a discrepancy in level of competition he's faced. He hasn't obviously faced the same level of competition that Stephen Butler has faced. But in saying that, I got to favor Patricia Volney to win. He's got the better chin. I think he's got the better boxing skills. Obviously, Butler is the more named fighter, been in with world champions, been at a higher level. But I think this is Patricia Volney's opportunity to make a statement in the Canadian boxing scene by beating fellow Canadian Stephen Butler in what would be a career-defining victory for Patrice Volney. And obviously, he wins this fight, and now potentially he may get a world opportunity fight, right, against guys like Janibek Elamakuni, who is really struggling to get opponents. So, for a guy like this, that might be the perfect opportunity. So it's a good fight. I'm interested in it. I do think my Canadian brethren is going to beat my Canadian brethren. It's nice, Canada on Canada. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. Probably the most hype fight this weekend on ESPN is Xander Zayas, the Puerto Rican superstar, up and comer, one of the hottest 25 under 25 fighters in the boxing world. 18-0, 12 knockouts, stepping up to face ex-world champion Patrick Teixeira, the tough Brazilian fighter. 34-4, 25 knockouts. Obviously, he's only been stopped once. That was when he lost his world title. This is a guy who beat and stopped Carlos Adames when they fought for the world title at 154 pounds. Teixeira is very tall, very long, very awkward, got some very good power. Xander Zayas, on the other hand, is, slick, fast, powerful, technically very good. I mean, when you watch him fight, you can see what the hype is about, right? He definitely has that eye test quality. The problem with him is after 3 or 4 rounds, he kind of loses focus. And at that point, then the fights start getting difficult. Even when he was knocking guys down in the first 3, 4 rounds, looking incredible, looking pound for pound-esque. And now all of a sudden, fights are becoming a lot more competitive. And at this point, you got to ask yourself, is it because they've brought him along too slowly? Is it that he just hasn't stayed as focused in training that he should? Obviously, he's a young guy, easy to get distracted, especially when you're getting money and attention, right? A fight like this is really going to be a great test because he's in there with a veteran who definitely wants to put himself back in the conversation, especially now at 154 pounds. Now that you have Errol Spence, Tim Tszyu, Bud Crawford, all in this weight division, which means there's some money going around, right? And you want to be involved. Even if you're not winning world titles, you want to be involved in world title fights, giving yourself a piece of the pie. So for Teixeira, this is the perfect opportunity. If he knocks Xander Zayas out, it's a great win. It puts him right back into the conversation. And now all of a sudden you're talking about him facing one of these other top fighters at the division, putting some good money in his pocket and potentially becoming a 2-time 154-pound world champion. For Xander Zayas, this is the career marker for him. Even though he's been in with good competition, and you can't really say he's a prospect anymore because now he really is a contender. I think he's ranked by all 4 sanctioning bodies in the top 15. But this is a definite step-up opponent. Definitely the most dangerous opponent he's been in with. If he takes his foot off the gas, isn't able to focus, he could get exposed. This is kind of like the recent fight we had at 147 pounds from Top Rank, where, how come I can't remember anybody? Santillan was facing, what's his face? The young black guy for the WBO title. I can't remember why his name escapes me. But that guy was the same. A guy that had tons of hype behind him, really looked fantastic. But the problem with him, also inconsistent. Looked like he lost focus during fights, right? Which made you wonder what he was going to do when he stepped up to face legitimate competition. And we saw it. It made him focus even better. It brought out the best in him. And he was fucking dynamic, powerful, and entertaining in that fight. For Xander Zayas, maybe this is exactly the same situation for him. The kind of opponent that's going to make him be hyper-focused and really be at his best. We will find out. Or it might be the opponent that exposes him as being somebody that is not as good as pundits were making him out to be. I doubt it's that, but you never know. You can't underestimate anybody. How come this isn't listed? All the fights listed, but not that one, I guess, because the other ones are earlier on in the week. There's quite a few fights today, tomorrow. 154, Xander Zayas. When you look at this division right now, Virgil Ortiz, I don't know why he's ranked number 1. That really escapes me. He's had one fight against a mediocre opponent. BoxRec's fucked. Funduro, Tim Tszyu, Madrimov, Charlo, Bochuk, Murdazaliev, Erickson Lubin, Jesus Ramos, Brandon Adams. That's pretty high. Obviously, he must have won his recent fight. Slava Spooner, a German fighter, never heard of him. Charles Conwell, Josh Kelly, Xander Zayas is right there. in the top 15, right? It's a pretty impressive top 15. Also, Radzad Butayev, the 147-pound fighter, has moved up. He's a great addition, very good fighter as well. So Zayas, what has he been doing? Obviously, he's young, 21 years old, right? To take on this level opponent at 21, that's pretty impressive. I saw somebody hyping up a fighter who was 23 years old and not taking on ex-world champions that are this dangerous, right? You know, to be a 21-year-old taking on this opposition, that's impressive, right? Because there is a big risk involved. 5'10", 74-inch reach, kind of the perfect physical dimensions for this weight class. Bigger than the majority of guys at that weight. When you think about who he's faced so far in his career, Robert Valenzuela Jr., Ronald Cruz, right? He's been in with that lower level of opponents and has done pretty well considering. But now he's stepping up and taking on a whole new beast in Teixeira. When we look at Teixeira, 33 years old, 5'11 and a half, 74 and a half inch reach, so a little taller and a little longer. Teixeira obviously has been in with much better opposition. Magomed Kurbanov, obviously he lost to him by unanimous decision. Paul Valenzuela, disqualification, fought Brian Carlos Castano, ended up losing his title to Castano. Fought Carlos Adames to win his title. Beat Mario Alberto Lozano to put him in that world title fight. Beat Nathan Gallimore. Beat Andrew Hernandez. Got knocked out by Curtis Stevenson back in 2016. That was quite the fight back in the day. Big knockout punch by Curtis Stevenson, who obviously has always been quite the knockout puncher. So it'll be interesting. It'll be a good fight. I'm very intrigued to see how it pans out. And it's going to be a great addition to what is a really stacked division as well. Then we get to one of America's brightest young up-and-coming fighters, Bruce Shoo Shoo Carrington. And probably the best thing about Shoo Shoo Carrington is he's a down-to-earth, smart, articulate kid. When you listen to him in interviews, right, he ain't trying to be cocky. He ain't trying to fucking put on this kind of, street air. He's just a well-spoken young man who really understands boxing. You can have interviews with him and he gives you great breakdowns to fights. Really intelligent. 11-0, 7 KOs, and now stepping up to face Enrique Vivas, 23-3, 12 knockouts. Obviously, Vivas is a very experienced fighter, but not that hard of a puncher. And generally, Top Rank and promotional companies like that, usually this is what they do. When they put you up with a very good opponent with a lot of experience and the possibility of beating you, usually it's a guy that isn't really a big puncher. So they kind of take that punch out of the element. So if you're going to get beat, you're going to get outworked or outskilled. Obviously, they don't think this kid is more skilled than Bruce Carrington. So then it comes down to him being tougher and outworking you and just pushing the pace and doing that. And so for a guy like Carrington, this is a good test because if you're going to be great, you need to be kind of like what we saw Raymond Ford against Kolmatov. You got to be able to change your style, show that dog in you, be able to be tough when you need to be tough, be skilled when you need to be skilled. So it'll be interesting to see how this fight pans out. I think Carrington is going to be impressive. And one thing I heard, and don't quote me on this because I'm not sure if it's guaranteed, but what I've heard is that the monster Inoue is going to be attending this fight because Bruce Carrington has consistently called out the monster, right? And the monster has obviously heard it. He follows boxing and he knows Carrington is a very bright, young prospect. Obviously, at this point, that fight wouldn't happen. Carrington needs to go on and become a world champion at 126 pounds before Inoue moves to 126 and challenges him. Otherwise, there's no point. But just the fact that Inoue is acknowledging him, that's a great first step. And it definitely is going to obviously be motivation for Carrington. If he sees Inoue sitting there, it really shows you that if I beat this kid, go out and beat another top contender, get my world title fight. Raymond Ford's title is right there, Ball. There's a few other potential positions you could go for. If I win one of those titles off of one of those champions, there's 4 champions, 4 belts. then I'm right there, right in time for obviously Inui's transition to his fifth weight division. And you know, I may be the guy that gets the call, right? So that's pretty exciting. If I was Carrington, I'd be super stoked. Obviously, that's what he wants, right? And this is the perfect opportunity. When we look at Vivas, I'm not sure what kind of resume he has, who he's beat, and what he's done, but let's just take a quick peek and check that shit out. Because when people say someone's experience, it doesn't necessarily mean I know who the fuck they are. Because I don't know if I've ever seen this kid fight. I may have, but not that I remember. This division right now: Figueroa, Lopez, Lee Wood has moved up, Ball, Espinoza, Ramirez, Ford is moving up. So both Wood and Ford are moving up. Angelillo, Villa, Vargas, Ria Abe, who just lost recently, Castro, Masamoto, young up and coming Japanese fighter. Josh Warrington is still listed this weight. And there's Bruce Carrington just ahead of Arnold Kagai, right? So Bruce Carrington is right there at number 20. He gets this win. He's probably going to move up close to the top 10, especially if he does it impressively. The guy he's facing, Bruce Carrington, how old is he? 27. So he's not young, 27 years of age, 5'8", 72-inch reach, which are great measurements for this division. Means you're going to be taller than the majority of fighters and longer than everybody, right? He's basically the same physical dimensions as Floyd Mayweather, maybe a little shorter. So it has him listed now fighting Brian DeGracias. Is this the same fighter or did something change? Oh, yeah, look. Now it's a different fighter that's being listed. So I don't know what the significance of that is. The guy he's facing now is 29-0, 3 knockouts, 1 draw, been stopped once. 3 losses, been stopped once with 25 KOs. So maybe a much more dangerous opponent, a guy that is bringing legitimate power. 30 years old, 5'6 and a half, 67-inch reach. So definitely giving up some reach. He just lost his last fight to Edward Velasquez, who was 14-1 by decision. Also lost to Eduardo Ramirez, got knocked out in 9 rounds. Lost to Jorge Sanchez by 10-round decision. So, been in with good Latino opponents, but none of these guys are huge names that I'm super familiar with. Maybe I'm just wrong. I think I saw the Edward Vargas fight. I definitely think I saw that fight. Vargas recently lost to Joe Cordina by majority decision. Obviously, he lost as well to Raymond Ford. So, yeah, so this guy lost to Vargas, who lost to the higher level opponent. So it should be the kind of guy that Carrington should still win, and definitely makes quite a statement, and probably going to elevate him 12 to 9 in that top 10 ranking, especially now that you have 2 of the top 10 fighters moving out of that division, right? Which opens up an opportunity for Bruce Carrington. So that'll be exciting. Then we get this fight. Obviously, this is Oscar Collazo, Puerto Rican fighter, minimum weight world champion, 9-0, 7 KOs. He's one of the most highly talked about and highly revered young, small fighters in boxing. The minimum weight division, obviously, you have the 2 Shiguki brothers who are there. You also have long reigning Thai champion as well. So it's a very good division. And then, of course, you have Oscar Collazo representing. And the majority of people feel that Oscar Collazo is by and far the best fighter of them all. But yet, of course, at this point, you got to fight him to prove it. He obviously hasn't unified titles yet. Right now, BoxRec has Jinjiro Shiguki ranked above him. And then you have Collazo, a Chinese fighter, Melvin Jerusalem, who beat Shiguki's brother, Yudai Suzuki, Hansboy Dumochov, the Uzbekistani fighter. Of course, the Thai fighter is there. And so, there's a lot of good young opponents there for him to face. For Collazo, 9-0, 7 KOs, that's pretty impressive. Obviously, he's been fast-tracked, became a world champion in less than 10 fights, and has very good knockout pedigree at such a young age. 27 years old, 5'2", 61-inch reach, fighting out of New Jersey, America. When you think about his resume, of course, he was fast-tracked. He was facing top fighters in his fourth fight. Pedro Villages, 13-1. Vic Saluter, 21-5. Uday Reyes, 15-1. Melvin Jerusalem, who you just saw ranked very highly and currently is a world champion once again, 20-2. Jaron Diagan, 10-3. And then Gutierrez, who's 10-1. Now he's facing Geraldo Zapata, 14-1. Zapata, I don't know much about him. 5 knockouts, Nicaraguan, 29 years old, 5'5", a little taller. Obviously, he's a taller fighter. When you look at his resume, he has not faced the elite caliber of opponent at this weight class. So it should be a statement fight for Collazo, going 10-0, maybe 8 knockouts, and hopefully putting himself in position for a unification fight. Because obviously at these smaller weights, that's what you need, right? If you're not facing the other world champions, you're not facing great competition, right? Because these divisions obviously are not as deep as some of the other divisions. So the best guys in these weight classes are the other champions. So you unifying and beating the other champions, that's ultimately what you need to do. And with 2 top Japanese fighters there, it also means potentially there's some good paydays in the Japanese market. Obviously, he's part of Miguel Cotto Promotions, getting quite a bit of show on DAZN, and obviously with a big home-built fan base in Puerto Rico. So, even in the U.S. and Puerto Rico, he also has a good fan base and a good opportunity there, even though he's a small fighter. They could easily package him with Xander Zayas and Berlanga, and you do the 3-headed Puerto Rican monster, right? And that would be the smart thing to do. I know they're all in different promotional companies, but you do that. You got a guy from minimum weight, you got a guy from 154, and then you got a guy from 168, and you got that whole boxing sort of atmosphere covered. And really, the hype and the attention these cards would continuously get would be pretty fucking exciting. And they're all big knockout punchers as well, explosive fighters, right? Even though obviously, Collazo's a minimum weight fighter, obviously fighting at really, really small weight divisions. But overall, it's a pretty nice weekend of fights. It's not the biggest weekend. It's not like the one we just had recently, which were some unbelievable, unbelievable weekends of boxing out of Saudi Arabia and elsewhere. But this is what you expect: a good little DAZN card, a good little ESPN card. You get 2 really good young up-and-coming ESPN fighters in Xander Zayas and, of course, in Shushu Carrington. Then you get guys like, obviously, Collazo, Michael Hunter, and Elias Iglesias, the 168-pound champion. So there's a lot of good fights, and obviously fights that are going to make an impact at some big weight divisions, right? 168, 154, obviously the heavyweight division as well. So, you get some wins in those divisions, and you're definitely putting yourself forward to some potentially better money fights. And now that Saudi Arabia is funding things and backing everything up, it's looking great. I announced earlier, but somehow I guess the video didn't have audio, so I took it down. I may be releasing a short later on tonight about it one more time. But Big Baby Anderson is going to be facing, I mentioned him, lost to Hunter, Bacoli. Now I got his name. Bacoli, which is a great fight. Great fight. And that's going to be on the undercard of the Bud Crawford California card. That card is shaping up to be fucking incredible. Incredible. I just put it on my phone today again because I want to do a video now that Bacoli fight has been announced to be on it as well. And I'll do that maybe later this weekend. But where is that? Oh, man. Like, this shit is fucking dynamite. It's always great when Bud Crawford is staying busy, but you got Bud Crawford and then Pitbull Cruz versus Valenzuela. Great fight. And then, of course, Andy Ruiz versus Big Baby Miller. It's a great matchup, right? Between those 2 fat slobs. Good matchup stylistically. And then, of course, Bacoli versus Glenn Jared Anderson. Right there. There it is. Man, that shit's fucking dynamite. Dynamite, right? And then you can have the winners face each other afterwards. And we know the Saudis, they just keep you busy, keep you fighting, keep you moving forward. So it's a great opportunity for Andy Ruiz and for Bacoli and for Anderson and maybe even fucking Fat Boy coming off of a loss to Daniel Dubois. And then after that, you have Morrell. Morrell is fighting, who's that kid? He looks familiar. Oh, Kalajas. Okay, Kalajas is a one-hit wonder. He had a big performance years and years ago, and based on that, his name stays relevant. But for Morel moving to 154 pounds, it's great that he's getting an opportunity. It's great the Cubans, right, are getting an opportunity on this card. Thank you, Saudi Arabia, for giving two undervalued Cubans an opportunity. And then, of course, Andy Cruz. He's not fighting really anybody that's that interesting at this point. Antonio Moran was relevant maybe 5 years ago. Recently, not so much. But nonetheless, it's good that both those Cuban fighters are getting big opportunities on this card. I mean, Bud Crawford headlining two big heavyweight matchups and then two Cubans on it. And there's probably going to be more as well. Uh, that's exciting. I'll get into it a little more, break it down later on this week. Obviously, maybe when it gets closer to actually happening, but I'm happy to see this money spreading to the UK. Obviously, the AJ fight in September, brought to you by Saudi Arabia. Obviously, the cards in Saudi Arabia themselves, and then now in California as well. So that's good. Spread the money, spread the wealth. But let me know what you think. Leave your comments below. Thanks for watching. Have a good week. Obviously, tomorrow is Friday here, so I'm really excited. My work week is done. So I will see you soon. Enjoy. Remember to like, subscribe, and share.